In this video, we'll let you know what Scrum is, all in less than 6 minutes. A project involves collaborative effort to create a new product, service, or other result, as defined in the project vision statement. Projects are impacted by constraints of time, cost, scope, quality, resources, organizational capabilities, and other limitations that make them difficult to initiate, plan and estimate, implement, review and retrospect, and release. It is therefore important for organizations to select and practice an appropriate project delivery methodology. This is where Scrum comes in. So what is Scrum? Scrum is one of the most popular agile methodologies. It is an adaptive, iterative, fast, flexible, and effective methodology designed to deliver significant value quickly and throughout a project. Scrum ensures transparency and communication and creates an environment of collective accountability and continuous progress. The Scrum framework, as defined in the SBOC guide, is structured in such a way that it supports product and service development in all types of industries and in any type of project, irrespective of its complexity. Let's now look at the 6 key principles of Scrum. The first Scrum principle is empirical process control, which is based on the ideas of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Next is self-organization. Scrum is designed for today's employees who have much more knowledge to offer than just their technical expertise, and who can deliver greater value when they're self-organized. The third principle is collaboration, which involves all the stakeholders working and interacting together to deliver the greatest value. Next is value-based prioritization. Requirements and their respective tasks are prioritized based on the value they hold for the customer. This way, the requirements which are the most valuable to the customer are done first, leading to increased ROI. The fifth principle is time boxing. Time is the most crucial factor in Scrum projects, and meetings and work periods are time boxed. The daily stand-up meeting is a 15-minute meeting. A sprint is time boxed according to the needs of the project, and can vary between 1 to 6 weeks. The sixth and last principle is iterative development, which allows for course correction, as all the people involved get a better understanding of what needs to be delivered as part of the project, and incorporate this learning in an iterative manner. Now, let's look at the Scrum aspects. Organization. Scrum roles fall into 2 broad categories, core roles and non-core roles. The core roles include the product owner, who is responsible for articulating customer requirements and maintaining business justification. The Scrum Master, who ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to complete the project successfully. And the Scrum team, who is responsible for understanding the requirements specified by the product owner and creating the deliverables of the project. The non-core roles include stakeholders, the Scrum guidance body, vendors, the chief product owner, and the chief Scrum Master. Business justification. Value-driven delivery enables Scrum projects to start delivering results as soon as possible. Scrum's adaptability allows the project's objectives and processes to change if its business justification changes. Quality. In Scrum, quality is defined as the ability of the completed product or deliverables to meet the acceptance criteria and achieve the business value expected by the customer. To ensure a project meets quality requirements, Scrum adopts an approach of continuous improvement, whereby the team learns from experience and stakeholder engagement to constantly keep the prioritized product backlog updated. Change. Scrum projects welcome change by using short, iterative sprints that incorporate customer feedback on each sprint's deliverables. This enables the customer to regularly interact with the Scrum team members, view deliverables as they are ready, and change requirements if needed earlier in the sprint. Risk. In Scrum projects, risks are identified, assessed, and responded to based on 2 factors: the probability of each risk's occurrence and the possible impact in the event of such occurrence. Let's now briefly look at the Scrum processes. This diagram illustrates the Scrum project's flow. As you can see here, the Scrum cycle begins with a stakeholder meeting, during which the project vision is created. The product owner then develops a prioritized product backlog, which contains a prioritized list of business and project requirements written in the form of user stories. Each sprint begins with a sprint planning meeting, during which high-priority user stories are considered for inclusion in the sprint. A sprint generally lasts between 1 and 6 weeks and involves the Scrum team working to create potentially shippable deliverables or product increments. During the sprint, short, highly focused daily stand-up meetings are conducted, where team members discuss daily progress. Toward the end of the sprint, a sprint review meeting is held, during which the product owner and relevant stakeholders are provided a demonstration of the deliverables. The product owner accepts the deliverables only if they meet the predefined acceptance criteria. The sprint cycle ends with a retrospect sprint meeting where the team discusses ways to improve processes and performance as they move forward into the subsequent sprint. Voila! We just covered the principles, aspects, and processes of Scrum in less than 6 minutes. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Study Course on a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge. In this module, you will learn how Scrum is helpful to any project. So let us see some of the key benefits of using Scrum. Adaptability is the very first benefit I want to point out here. The Scrum principles of empirical process control and iterative delivery make projects adaptable and open to incorporating change when it occurs. Scrum processes are designed to embrace change. A key benefit for stakeholders is that Scrum is customer-centric. Emphasis on business value and having a collaborative approach that includes stakeholders ensures a customer-oriented framework in a Scrum-controlled project. Continuous delivery of value is an additional benefit that results from being customer-centric. In Scrum, iterative processes enable the continuous delivery of value through the ship deliverables process. Each sprint produces a potentially shippable product, service, or desired result. Early delivery of high value is a closely related business benefit of using Scrum. Not only is the delivery of value continuous, the create prioritized product backlog process ensures that the highest value requirements of the customer are met first. Both the customer and the project team benefit from continuous feedback. In Scrum, continuous feedback is provided through the conduct daily stand-up and demonstrate and validate sprint processes. Continuous feedback contributes to another key benefit, transparency. In a Scrum-managed project, all information centers, such as the Scrum board and sprint burnout chart, are continually displayed and updated, which leads to an open working environment. Sprint review meetings demonstrate potentially shippable products to stakeholders, keeping them fully informed about the current status and progress of the project. Transparency enhances the important benefit of a high-trust environment. The conduct daily stand-up and retrospect sprint processes promote transparency and collaboration. This leads to a high-trust work environment, ensuring low friction between employees. Scrum's adaptability and transparency create an environment of continuous improvement. As the project progresses, the deliverables are improved progressively, sprint by sprint, with changes and improvements being included and managed through the Scrum prioritized product backlog process. Another important benefit is sustainable pace. Scrum processes are designed such that the people involved can work at a pace that they can sustain indefinitely. Another benefit of using Scrum is an efficient development process. In Scrum, it has been observed that time boxing and minimizing non-essential work leads to higher efficiency levels. The next benefit is motivation. The conduct daily stand-up and retrospect sprint processes lead to greater levels of motivation among employees. Faster problem resolution is one of the important benefits of using Scrum in projects. Collaboration and co-location of cross-functional teams lead to identifying and solving problems more quickly. The next benefit is effective deliverables. The demonstrate and validate process and regular reviews after creating deliverables ensures effective deliverables to the customer. The next benefit is collective ownership. The approve, estimate, and commit user stories process allows team members to take ownership of the project and of their work, leading to better quality in Scrum. High velocity is another important benefit. A collaborative framework enables highly skilled cross-functional teams to achieve their full potential and high velocity. Scrum pioneer and signer of the Agile Manifesto, Jeff Sutherland, calls this state hyper-productivity. And the last benefit that we will discuss is Scrum's innovative environment. The retrospect sprint and retrospect project processes create an environment of introspection, learning, and adaptability, leading to an innovative and creative work environment. And that wraps up this module introducing key benefits of using Scrum in any project. I look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Master course. Now let's take a closer look at the processes and how they work. You probably remember hearing that a project has a product backlog of prioritized requirements, as well as a product owner who is responsible for prioritizing these requirements. Now the question is, how do you get this work done? First of all, let's define the Scrum processes in general. Scrum processes address the specific activities and flow of a Scrum project. In total, there are 19 processes, which are grouped into 5 phases. These phases are presented in chapters 8 through 12 of the SBOT guide. These 5 phases describe each process in detail, including the associated inputs, tools, and outputs. Also, in each process, some inputs, tools, and outputs are designated as mandatory, while others are designated as optional. The decision to include any optional input, tool, and/or output depends on the particular project, organization, or industry. Inputs and outputs denoted as mandatory are important for the successful implementation of Scrum in any organization. Next, we'll take a closer look at the phases and the processes enlisted under them. Initiate is the first phase, and the processes carried out as part of Initiate are as follows. Create project vision is the first process performed. In this process, the project business case is reviewed to create a project vision statement that will serve as the inspiration and provide focus for the entire project. The product owner is identified in this process. Identify Scrum Master and stakeholders is the second process, during which the Scrum Master is identified using specific selection criteria. Form Scrum Team is the third process in the Initiate phase. In this process, Scrum team members are identified. Normally, the product owner has the primary responsibility of selecting team members, but he or she often chooses the team in collaboration with the Scrum Master. The fourth process is Develop Epics. In this process, the project vision statement serves as the basis for developing epics, which are large, unrefined user stories. User group meetings may be held to develop epics. Create a prioritized product backlog is the next process. In this process, epics and unrefined user stories are refined and elaborated, then prioritized to create a prioritized product backlog for the project. The done criteria is also established at this point. The last process classified under the Initiate phase is Conduct Release Planning. In this process, the Scrum core team reviews the user stories in the prioritized product backlog to develop a release planning schedule, which is essentially a phased deployment schedule that can be shared with the project stakeholders. The second phase we're going to learn is Plan and Estimate, and these are processes grouped under this phase. First is Create User Stories. We can see that in this process, user stories and their related user story acceptance criteria are created. User stories are usually written by the product owner and are designed to ensure that the customer's requirements are clearly depicted and can be fully understood by all the stakeholders. User story writing exercises may be held. This involves Scrum team members creating the user stories. User stories are incorporated into the prioritized product backlog. Approve, estimate, and commit user stories is the next process. In this process, the product owner approves user stories for a sprint. Then, the Scrum Master and Scrum team estimate the effort required to develop the functionality described in each user story. And the Scrum team commits to develop the customer requirements in the form of approved, estimated, and committed user stories. The third process in the plan and estimate phase is create tasks. In this process, the approved, estimated, and committed user stories are broken down into specific tasks and compiled into a task list. Often, a task planning meeting is held for this purpose. Estimate tasks is the fourth process. During this process, the Scrum core team, in a task estimation workshop, estimates the effort required to accomplish each item in the task list. The result of this process is an effort-estimated task list. The last process conducted during this phase is create sprint backlog. In this process, the Scrum core team holds sprint planning meetings, where the group creates a sprint backlog containing all tasks to be completed in the sprint. The third phase we'll discuss in this module is implement. Let's now look at the various processes listed to be carried out during this phase. The first process in the implement phase is create deliverables. In this process, the Scrum team works on the tasks in the sprint backlog to create sprint deliverables. A Scrum board is often used to track the work and activities being carried out. Issues or problems being faced by the Scrum team could be updated in an impediment log. The second process performed is conduct daily stand-up. Every day, a highly focused time-boxed meeting is conducted, which is called the daily stand-up meeting. This is the forum for the Scrum team to update each other on their progress and any impediments they may be facing. The last process conducted during the implement phase is groom prioritized product backlog. In this process, the prioritized product backlog is continuously updated and maintained. A prioritized product backlog review meeting may be held, in which any changes or updates to the backlog are discussed and incorporated into the prioritized product backlog as appropriate. The next phase is review and retrospect. There are three main processes that take place during this phase. The first one is convene Scrum of Scrums. In this process, Scrum team representatives convene for Scrum of Scrums meetings in predetermined intervals, or whenever required, to collaborate and track their respective progress, impediments, and dependencies across teams. This is relevant only for large projects where multiple Scrum teams are involved. The second process is demonstrate and validate sprint. In this process, the Scrum team demonstrates the sprint deliverables to the product owner and to the relevant stakeholders in a sprint review meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to secure approval and acceptance of the product or service by the product owner. The last process performed in the review and retrospect phase is retrospect sprint. In this process, the Scrum Master and Scrum team meet to discuss the lessons learned throughout the sprint. This information is documented as lessons learned, which can be applied to future sprints. Often, as a result of this discussion, there may be agreed actionable improvements or updated Scrum guidance body recommendations. The last phase is release. There are two main processes performed during this phase. The first one is ship deliverables. In this process, accepted deliverables are delivered or transmitted to the relevant stakeholders. A formal working deliverables agreement documents the successful completion of the sprint. The second process is retrospect project. In this process, which completes the project, organizational stakeholders and Scrum core team members assemble to retrospect the project and identify, document, and internalize the lessons learned. Often, these lessons lead to documentation of agreed actionable improvements to be implemented in future projects. This brings us to the end of the segment on the Scrum processes. Before we wind up, let's recap the various phases and processes we learned. Here is the summary of all Scrum processes. I hope you have enjoyed learning with us today. We look forward to seeing you in our next segment, Scrum versus Traditional Project Management. Thank you for learning with us.
Hello, and welcome to Module 20 of our Scrum Study course on the Scrum Body of Knowledge. So far, we have discussed the benefits, purpose, scalability, principles, processes, phases, and aspects. Actually, everything one needs to know to implement Scrum. Have you ever wondered why Scrum is becoming more popular with every passing day? The simplest answer is that Scrum is better than traditional project management methods in many ways. Let's take a look at the differences between Scrum and a typical traditional project management model in a detailed way. The main difference between traditional project management models and the Scrum methodology is the way in which the project is handled. Traditional project management is based on processes, while Scrum asks for a change in mindset with its focus on the people involved in the project. Although processes and tools are necessary in completing a project successfully, it is always the people who undertake, participate in, and implement the project. They do the work that takes the project from idea to reality. According to Scrum, the key factors in any project are the people, and the emphasis should be on them and their actions. Various cross-functional teams work in parallel across sprints to deliver potentially shippable deliverables at the end of each sprint. In a traditional model, the level of functionality is not done remains high, and no product is delivered until the end or very near the end of the project. What gives Scrum an edge over other practices when it comes to the size of the team? Scrum can be used for managing projects of all sizes. Scrum works well for most projects and most team sizes. Large projects utilize multiple Scrum teams which work in sync to ensure project progress. Since its early days, Scrum has focused on producing working software over comprehensive documentation. It still does, and has expanded that focus to include the incremental development of products other than software. While documentation is necessary and useful for any project, Scrum teams focus on interim deliverables, in which real value is delivered to the customer. The documentation is done minimally, as and when it is required. Lessons learned are recorded during retrospective meetings. The process followed in Scrum is